what is written in the very first verses of the Bible, where it speaks of the Ruach of the Elohim. In verse 2, it says that the earth was without form and void, verse 2 of Genesis, and darkness was over the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So here's that translation. Here, for example, in this other Bible, it says that the Spirit of God was on the surface of the waters. They are two translations, as you can see, totally different, because giving the idea that the Spirit of God was on the surface of the waters gives the idea of something stable, that is, something real. Instead, here they say, hovered. And in fact, this is the correct translation because in Hebrew, there is the word mereshiphet, which really means hovering, and it is the same verb that the Bible uses in the book of Deuteronomy in chapter 32, when it talks about the eagle which hovers over its offspring, that is, over its chicks, and therefore truly gives the idea of flying, staying on the surface of the water without moving its wings. But the other interesting thing is this. In both translations it says the Spirit of God. In reality, in Hebrew it says Ruach of Elohim. There is no article, and this is important because it means to say that a Ruach of Elohim hovered on the surface of the waters. Not the Spirit of God. It is a totally different thing because the Elohim could have more than one of these Ruach. Here he tells us that un Ruach, and, as I say in the videos, in which I suggest replacing the Italian translations with Hebrew verses, this is one of those terms that must be replaced with Hebrew verses. Let's not translate it because translating with the Spirit of God is truly a theological translation, and therefore we leave Ruach. We say that a Ruach of Elohim hovered, that is, it had this typical flight of birds of prey with firm wings on the surface of the waters. And we will see later that in reality, these Elohim really had a lot of tools to move around. And I would say that we can move on to a description of other flying objects. Jeff Benner is the president, founder, and director of the Center for Ancient Hebrew Studies. When he talks about the term Ruach, in effect, he says that it is something that travels following a path, that is, a pre-established route. And he says it clearly in one of the dictionaries that he wrote, in this case the one in which he analyzes 1,000 verbs and words of particular importance. He says that since Ruach has a very extensive semantic value, obviously since it is about wind, and given that Hebrew is, like all the others, a polysemous language, Ruach comes to have other meanings. For example, it also comes to have the meaning of identifying the character of man. Not the spirit, not the soul, but the character. Like how we say that a man has a fighting spirit, or a player has a team spirit. This is the same meaning, so in reality it passes as wind. Just as in Italian spirit means both grappa, that is, distilling the spirit from the mark, and ghosts, and indeed an attitude of a person such as team spirit. In Hebrew it is exactly the same thing. So, when we read Ruach in Hebrew, we take the context into account. Here we have a Ruach hovering on the surface of the waters.